This is part 2 of lesson 10-1, all about circles and circumference. Here we have to fill in the blanks. So 2 circles are blank circles if and only if they have congruent radii. So using context clues, what do we think that is? Congruent. 2 circles are congruent circles if they have the same size radius. And you don't say radiuses, plural is radii. So if GH is the same size as JK, GH is the radius here, JK is the radius here. So if they're the same length, that means our circles are the same size. So we're going to say circle G is the same size as circle J. So you name a circle with the little circle symbol with the dot in the middle and then the name of the center of the circle. Okay, next part. Blank circles are coplanar circles, meaning they're on the same flat surface, that have the same center. This is a tough one. It's actually called concentric. Concentric. So it's 2 different circles, and they're just all centered together because they have the same middle point. So here we have 2 circles. We have circle A. Just ignore the bigger circle. Look at this smaller circle here. We have circle A with a radius of AB, right? And then we also have this bigger circle, and that's also circle A because it has the same center, but it has a radius AC. So it's got a bigger radius. So circle A and circle A, they're both circle A, but they're different sizes, right? So we call these 2 circles concentric when they're different sizes, but they share the same center. All right, find measures in intersecting circles. This is kind of fun. This is where the math comes in. All right, the diameter of circle X is 22 units. So here's circle X. So the diameter is from X to Z, and that's 22 units, okay? The diameter of circle Y is 16 units. So circle Y here, the radius is from W to Y, and that's 16 units. Now, what do you notice here? They both overlap in this little WZ part. They both use WZ, right? So we're going to get to that in a second. WZ is 5 units. So I ran out of room to write that, but this little highlighted guy is 5. All right, so what is the length of XY, this entire line? Well, basically, we're just adding this 22 and this 16 up. We're adding them together. But since they overlap here, we're counting this twice, right? So we're going to have to take that away. We can either take it away from the 22, and that way it's not really 22, it's 17. So we'd have 17 and then this 16. Or we can use the whole 22 and then take the 5 away from the 16. So it'd be 22 and 11, right? Either way works. So we're going to add 22 plus 16, and then we're going to take 5 away. 22 plus 16 minus 5. So 22 plus 16 is 38. 38 minus 5 is 33 units. That's the length of XY. So just kind of use, think through it, common sense. Here's the radius of one. Here's the radius of another. They overlap here, and then it tells us how much the overlap is worth. So we just need to take that overlap away from one of the 2 radius measurements. Not both, because then we wouldn't count it at all. We want to count it 1 time. We just don't want to count it 2 times. Okay, hopefully that's making sense. All right, and then we have circumference here. So circumference, if a circle has a diameter D or radius R, the circumference, which we call C, equals the blank times pi, the diameter times pi, or twice the radius times pi, right? So if the circumference equals diameter times pi, remember diameter is the same thing as 2r. 2 radiuses, 2 radii equal the diameter. So 2r or d, they're the same thing, and then we multiply them by pi to get the circumference. Now, when you think of circumference, we usually don't say this way, but this is exactly how to find circumference if you know diameter. We usually look at it this way, but we don't say it in this order. Since we're multiplying all three of these, we can move the terms around. Doesn't matter what order we write them in. So usually you see this as circumference equals 2 times pi times r. 2 pi r. But 2 times r is the same thing as d. So circumference is either the diameter times pi or 2 times the radius times pi. All right, and then let's do some math to work all that out. All right, so here up at the top, this is all math, this page. Shouldn't take too long. I hope it's not blurry. All right, a series of crop circles was discovered in Alberta, Canada on September 4th, 1999. The largest of the circles had a radius of 30 feet. Show how to find its circumference, and then the important part, round to the nearest hundredth. We are going to be rounding when you're working with pi, unless it tells you not to, and we do have an example of that. So you always need to see what it tells you to round to. The nearest tenth, the nearest whole number, the nearest hundredth. Those are usually your only choices. Okay, so for circumference, circumference equals 2 times the radius times pi, or 2 pi r, right? And it tells us right here that the radius is 30. So circumference equals 2 times 30 times pi. 2 times 30 is 60. And then in your calculator, if you have a calculator, I know middle school math, we always use 3.14. And if you don't have a calculator handy, 3.14 is fine. But pi is actually a much bigger decimal than 3.14. So on this calculator, this is the one you're allowed to use on your test, on this calculator, actually I think anymore they don't even hand them to you. They're just all in the computer. But you do have this symbol. It's the pi symbol. So if you touch it, you see 3.141592654, blah, 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 blah. So this is a little more accurate because they include more of the decimal. They don't round it off to 3.14. So that's what we're going to use since we are able to. We have the button. So we're going to do 60 times the pi key. So 60, hit times the pi key. Boom. And then you have to hit equals. Boom. 188.495. It said to round to the nearest hundredth, which is the second decimal. So we're rounding this guy. So to round it, we look at the number to the right. It's a 5, so we're going to round this up. Well, this whole thing is going to round up to 50, right? Because you can't round a 9 up. It just rolls it to the next 10. So it's actually going to be 188.50. So circumference equals 188.5 or 0.50. I don't care how you write it. And it's in feet. And we're not finding area. We're finding length, right? The distance around the outside of a circle, that's circumference. So nothing is squared when you find the circumference. Okay, let's do another one. Show how to find the diameter and radius of each circle to the nearest hundredth. So again, we're rounding to the nearest second decimal place. All right, so here it's going to give us the circumference and we work backwards. Okay, so our circumference formulas are d times pi or 2 times r times pi, or 2 pi r. I'm going to write it on both of these. D pi or 2 pi r. Okay, so when it gives us the circumference, 65.4 feet, I'm going to write 65.4 equals diameter times pi. And to get diameter by itself, I need to get rid of times pi, so I'm going to divide by pi. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I never do the little squiggle right on top of when I write the pi sign, so I just make it look like these little handlebars. I just draw a straight line. All right, so 65.4 divided by pi. 65.4 divided by the pi key equals 20.82, because we have to round it up to the nearest hundredth. The 7 makes it go up. So 20.82. Diameter equals 20.82 what? Feet. Okay, then we want to find the radius. So 65.4 equals 2 pi r. I'm trying to get r by itself. Right now it's r times 2 pi. So to get rid of times 2 pi, I'm going to divide by 2 pi. So I have to do the same thing over here. Now here I am going to round because I can't work backwards in my calculator. So I'm going to put in 65.4 divided by, and I can't hit 2 times the pi key now because it just won't, order of operations, it'll divide by 2 and then multiply by pi. That's not what I want to do. So I'm going to divide by, I'm going to double 3.14, which is 6.28, and I'm going to divide by that. So divided by 6.28 equals about 10.41. 10.41. So radius equals 10.41 feet. And is 10.41 double 20.82? I mean, sorry, is it half of 20.82? Yes, and the radius is half the diameter. So that makes sense. Okay, let's do another one. Circle has a circumference of 77.8 centimeters. So 77.8 equals diameter times pi. I'm looking for the diameter, so I got to get rid of this times pi. So I divide both sides by pi, and those get canceled. 77.8 divided by pi. 24.76. About 24.76. And that's in centimeters. Okay, and then for radius, you technically could just divide this by 2 and you get the radius, but I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. So I'm going to put 77.8 equals 2 pi r. I want r by itself, so I have to divide by 2 pi. Same thing over here. And 2 times pi is like saying 2 times 3.14, which is 6.28. So 77.8 divided by 6.28 gives me about 12.39, it looks like, when I round it. 12.39. And that's in centimeters. So if I multiply that times 2, I get 24.70, once I round, 78. Well, that's a little bit bigger because of my rounding, but it's close enough, right? We rounded a whole bunch, so close enough. 24.76 here. When I did it here, I got 24.78, but that's because we rounded pi. That's okay. So it's just about half. All right, standardized test example. Here we go. Show how to find the exact circumference of circle K. I want you to pay attention to what it says here. The exact circumference. When we round, when we multiply by pi and then we round our answer to the nearest hundredth, is that the exact answer? No. So how can we avoid rounding? Yeah, we just got to leave pi in our answer. And we see that sometimes in our textbook or what we're reading or our worksheets or whatever. So we're just going to leave pi in our answer instead of multiplying out by pi. Okay, that's going to keep it exact. All right, so here, this is circle K. And what is this gibberish it's given me right here? I see this triangle. It looks kind of familiar because I see a square root of 2. I know that I just worked on special right triangles. This is a right triangle. What else do I know? Well, I know this side is the radius of the circle because it's the middle to the outside. And I know from here to here, that's also the radius. And in a circle, the radius stays the same all the way around, right? So what kind of right triangle has congruent legs of 45, 45, 90? 45, 45, 90. And do you remember we learned about special case 45, 45, 90 triangles? Whatever the legs are, they're both the same. You multiply by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. So if I want to know what the leg is, I just say, okay, what did I multiply by the square root of 2 to get 3 times the square root of 2? 3. The radius here of my circle is 3. You also could have just divided by the square root of 2 to go backwards. Okay, so I know the radius is 3, and it tells me show how to find the exact circumference of the circle. And I know the radius. So I know circumference with the radius equals 2 times pi times the radius. So for me, that's going to be 2 times pi times 3. And I don't want to multiply anything by pi, so I'm going to multiply 2 times 3. That's 6, and then I have this pi. circumference equals 6 pi, and it does not give me units of measure, and the last step here is to multiply by pi, but since I'm finding the exact answer, I don't want to round anything, so I'm just going to leave it here. We call this leaving it in terms of pi. We'll just leave pi in our answer. All right, last problem. Pools. The circumference of the circular swimming pool shown is about 56.5 feet. The circumference, the distance around the outside. What are the diameter and radius of the pool? Round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so I know diameter times pi equals the circumference. So diameter times pi equals 56.5. I got to divide both sides by pi. So diameter equals, where's my calculator? 56.5 divided by pi. 17.98-ish. It said to round to the nearest hundredth, so 17.98. And my units of measure are in feet. Okay, and then for the radius, circumference equals 2 pi r. So the circumference is 56.5. I want to get r by itself, so I need to divide by 2 pi to cancel them out. So I got to divide this side by 2 pi. And when I have to multiply 2 times pi, I get about 6.28. So I'm just going to use that. 56.5 divided by 6.28 equals 8.996. So it's going to round it up to 9. I know the diameter is 17.98. So I'm going to keep this at 8.99. 8.99. If you round up to 9, that's fine. Radius equals 8.99 feet. If I doubled this, I get exactly 17.98. If I round up to 9 and I double it, I get 18, which this is almost 18, so that's close enough. When you're rounding, you can be off a little bit. It's okay. Not a lot, just a little. All right, let me know if you guys have questions on how to find the diameter and radius when we're talking about circumference, and stay tuned for lesson 10-2.